This is Krull for the Atari 2600, published by Atari in 1983. This is one of those silver label Atari cartridges that you see from time to time, and I always thought they looked really slick when I was a kid. Over time, I have to say that these particular label carts, they seem to be really resistant to time. I have a whole bunch of these cartridges, and the silver label games, they look pretty darn good. Maybe it was a higher quality label. Also, I think that the quality of the games might be a little higher for these cartridges too. Maybe that's worth diving into in a later video. Krull is based on a movie that came out in the early 80s. I'm sure a lot of you have seen it. I actually like this movie just fine, and since playing this game again, it makes me want to go give it another watch. The story of Krull is pretty simple. It's a fantasy, science fiction-ish type of a film about a princess kidnapped on her wedding day by this bad guy monster. And the journey is the prince, which is you, going to rescue her. It's a classic trope, of course, but there are some interesting fantasy elements to it, and it has Liam Neeson in it, in one of his earliest roles. He's not the main character, but it is Liam Neeson doing what Liam Neeson does best, and that's him being some kind of a fighter. Krull is actually compiled of a few mini-games, sort of, and I say this knowing that some other Atari 2600 games attempted to have different mini-games in them, and they didn't really pan out that way. Here, I feel like we have a few distinct screens that sort of follow the plot of the movie, first of all, and they kind of just feel like different mini-games to me. There are a few different Atari 2600 cartridges out there that were based on movie properties, and they didn't really come anywhere close to mimicking their source material. But this one actually does a pretty good job of doing that. We have an introduction screen with some basic animations, and then some text on the screen to let you know what game you're playing. My recollection is that Atari text had to be explicitly programmed in the cartridges, so you didn't always see that much of it in the actual games. When this one starts, it's basically an introduction scene to the movie. It's in the middle of your wedding, and then a bunch of alien soldiers arrive and they kidnap the princess. The soldiers, if I remember correctly, they're robotic bodies with some sort of an alien-like creature in the helmet. They don't go into too much detail in the movie, but they're basically faceless monsters here, and I think they're represented pretty well. I certainly see the comparison. But the first level, it's one of futility. Yes, you're going to be running around the level, pressing the fire button and stabbing creatures with your sword, but eventually, they're going to overwhelm you and they kidnap the princess. This is just how it is. So, try to be cautious during this screen and enjoy stabbing whatever you feel like stabbing. Gather some points, but don't get too greedy. They're going to shoot these laser spears at you from time to time, so be prepared to dodge. Ultimately, they're going to kidnap the princess for the game to progress. Once the princess is kidnapped, we move on to the second, basically, minigame. It's a quick one, and I suppose you could look at this as just a filler time between stages, but you do actually have to try to do something. You're on a horse racing across the plains to mount your rescue. On the ground as you're running, you're going to see potentially two different icons. There's an extra life, and then there's this little thing that looks like, I don't know, it looks kind of like a star, sort of, maybe. Press the button when you're over one of these icons to pick them up. And you want to pick the little star thing up because that's the weapon you have to use to beat the game. This weapon is called the glaive. Star Wars had a lightsaber, and Krull has a glaive. I've always kind of thought that this was an interesting choice for what they called the weapon, because an actual glaive is a medieval polearm weapon with a big blade at the end, so it's this really long pole thing, and here we've got a much smaller, little boomerangy type of thing. Two very differently shaped weapons. But here we have the glaive, and it's a mystical weapon that, like a star with blades on it, you throw it, and it hopefully cuts something at the other end, and then it comes back to you like a boomerang. How you catch it without ripping your hand apart is certainly a logical question to ask, but it is a fantasy movie that was rated PG, so, well, here we are. After you finish running through the steps, trying to pick up a glaive or maybe an extra life, you're going to find yourself in the lair of the Widow of the Web. It's a cavern with a poisonous crystal spider walking around it. There are a bunch of moving webs, and you have to navigate these. If you press the fire button, you're going to jump, and you're going to need to use this to get over the webs, because the webs are kind of moving outwards, like in waves. If you get stuck, it's sometimes easier to not fight against the flow of the webs, but let it take you to the end of the screen, so you can kind of start over. That's actually kind of important, because the level does have a timer, basically. It's not completely obvious, but if you take too long, the spider is just going to run around and kill you eventually. So you have to try to be quick about it, and jump over the webs, and get to the top center of the screen. This is like the center cocoon. When you get to this cocoon, you're going to see that there's an icon that pops up on the screen, on the edges of the screen, in one spot, and that's the correct way for you to go. This is supposed to signify the direction of the Black Fortress. The Black Fortress is where the end boss is. It's a magical fortress that moves. So this is how you figure out where it is. You're going to find yourself on this screen replaying it over and over, because you're going to need to find the new location every time. Get to this part of the screen when you find it, and then if you leave the screen at that location, it will bring you to another image of you racing across the plains on horseback. Once again, if there's an extra life or a glaive and you can get it, pick it up. If you've chosen the correct path at the end of this run, you're going to see the Black Fortress rise up from the ground, and then you're going to run inside. Now we're at the end battle, and it's kind of a cross between Yar's Revenge and Donkey Kong a little bit. The beast looks like Donkey Kong to me, at least for the 2600, and what you need to do is destroy the wall behind the beast, which is like Yar's Revenge. Now, you press the fire button to throw your glaive, and it's going to move up the screen, and you can control it to destroy this wall, and that will ultimately free the princess. But you have to do it a lot, and if you hit the beast, you lose your glaive. If you lose your glaive, or if you even start this level with no glaive, which is certainly a possibility because your horse does travel pretty fast, there's nothing you can do on the screen. In that case, you have to just dodge the enemy blasts and race to one side of the screen to try and escape. If that happens, you have to go back to the spider cavern, hopefully picking up another glaive along the way. And then you head back to the Black Fortress to try again. If you can free the princess, you can defeat the beast, and you can call it a day. But this boss fight is not an easy one. First, the beast will eat your glaive immediately if you hit him, which means you can literally enter the level, press the fire button, and you hit him and it's over immediately. So you have to rinse and repeat. The beast also doesn't really have an obvious pattern of movement, or at least not one that I can notice. He just shifts directions sometimes, and it's super frustrating. It's just not easy to beat. Maybe it's easier with save states if you use them, but I don't have them for the system. When you open up a big enough hole, the princess is going to slide down a ramp, and you're going to catch her. Then your glaive just switches color to red, and then you can one-shot the beast and are done with it. Or at least you're done with it for a second or two, because the game just loops back to the beginning, like a lot of Atari games, and wants you to do the exact same thing over again. I sunk a lot of time into this game as a kid, and playing it now is certainly fun, but beating the boss is definitely a chore. As much as I tried, I couldn't beat him for purposes of recording it for this video, so, well, there it is. So that's all I have today for Krull for the Atari 2600. If this is your type of thing, please like and subscribe and all that good stuff, and thanks for stopping by to take a look. Hope to catch you on another video.